Hello, welcome to my channel. I want to start off by wishing you a happy new year. 2020 ended up being a really tough year for most people I know, so I can only imagine it was probably tough on you too. Here's to 2021 and all the opportunities that have yet to come. My name is Jeremy, but I've gone by JD professionally since college. I wanted to film this video today because it's an anniversary that I have been wanting to share about for some time. Today, 1 year ago, I visited my doctor and had a very frank discussion with him. This wasn't the first conversation I'd had with him. I first saw him in August of 2019 when I was on the brink of suicide for the millionth time. I was fed up a year ago. I didn't want to keep feeling the way I felt, which I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a moment. I told him that I had pondered and prayed about it for many years, and I was finally ready to try a pharmaceutical option to help make my mental wellness better. I started an antidepressant, which is still kind of hard for me to say out loud. I don't know about you, but I find there's a lot of stigma attached to mental illness as well as antidepressants. And I kind of always felt like that was the last resort. I saw a counselor, I worked on a physical health regimen, I changed up my diet, I tried making my sleep patterns better, I listened to music like it was going out of style. I felt like I did absolutely everything I could do, and that this was my last option. So I went to my doctor and he gave me a prescription. That was a year ago, and the rest is history. But I want to go back into that history a little bit to describe what brought me to that point. I'm a freelance and professional DJ and producer, announcer, MC, drummer, writer, and TikTok addict. I grew up in the tomato capital of Canada, a town called Leamington, Ontario, which had a Heinz factory, and the information center is a giant tomato. I'm the third of 4 siblings who I'm very close to. I've been asked what my life was like before my mental illness started. The truth is, some of my earliest memories were difficult. I would go to my cousin's house for a sleepover, and I'd have an emotional breakdown every time. What I didn't realize until this year, it was separation anxiety. It went with me into my teen and adult years. While I didn't necessarily realize what it was until recently, I did work on it head on by forcing myself to move out of the house at 18 years old, to Red Deer, to Calgary, and then to Fort McMurray at 22. If I didn't take that first step of moving out at 18, there was no way I could have moved to Fort McMurray. So I didn't even realize it, but I've been resilient for years, and God's had planned for me for a long time as well. I was 11 years old the first time I wanted to take my life. I was chatting with a friend online who told me not to. I didn't listen to him, and I attempted. Thankfully, I immediately regretted it. That was one of my greatest moments of shame and regret as a young person. It was also one of my earliest moments of feeling completely alone. I wish I would have spoken to my parents or family friends that I trusted. I feel like I would be telling a very different story today if I would have spoken up about what I was experiencing and learned about mental illness the same way I learned about physical illness. When I was 15, my dad unfortunately lost his business and we moved to Alberta. I was in the middle of homeschooling through my grade 10 semester and had to start over doing different subjects, and I had to play a month of catch up in a small town of 2,000 people after living in a medium-sized town with stable internet and a McDonald's. The transition was tough. I stayed after school with a few of my teachers for weeks to assist me in getting caught up. If it wasn't for them, I don't know if I would have gotten through it. I experienced a lot of bullying at that school. I was thankful that I had the people around me that I did to remind me of my value and importance. I think they're why I'm still here today. I remember going home and crying into my pillow to try to get through everything that I was dealing with. This also was the time when social media was really picking up steam, and I remember arguing online with a couple of my bullies. It took everything in me to still choose to be kind to them in the end, because that's who I am. Up to high school, and after I started adulting, I really didn't understand what mental illness was. I'd heard the words depression and anxiety thrown out there, but I don't think anyone in my life really understood what they were. I felt that stigma as a young person, and I didn't even realize it. My dream since I was 6 was to get into radio. It wasn't until I moved to Calgary that I was finally on my way. I went to an induction meeting at SAIT with instructors and 20 potential students and only 2 seats remaining in that class. One of the instructors then said something that was really hard to hear. It was the first time someone said it to me, and it basically signaled the end of what I wanted to do with my life. He told me, "You have a lisp. Because of this, you're gonna have an extremely hard time, and no program director in their right mind will ever hire you for on air." Those words hung in the air. I felt absolutely broken. My dreams, what I'd given my whole life to become, were halted because one man told me I wasn't good enough. I cried my face off. I couldn't believe that everything I cared about had come to an end. Only 2 seats remained in that class, so the odds were already small to begin with, and then he basically sealed the deal for me. I was going through my mail about 3 weeks later, and I had a letter. I opened it up with uncertainty as to what I was about to read. My jaw hit the floor. "Congratulations, you've been selected to hold a seat in the radio broadcasting program." You thought I cried before? Well, that was nothing compared to this. My college career wasn't just sunshine and rainbows. It was a lot of tough work. I did in fact have a heavy speech impediment, which no one ever told me growing up. I worked hard on it. By the end of college, and after a summer working for the biggest station in Red Deer, it was time to move on. I ended up getting hired by a small station in Fort McMurray, which gave me the opportunity to learn, grow, and become the person I am today. I was also able to prove my instructor wrong. I persevered and conquered my greatest battle to date to pursue my dream. I started as the afternoon host and then became the music director. I took care of all the music and spoke to artists and record labels. I also became the social media director, news director, and the guy everyone saw at all the events around town. There were almost no jobs I wasn't doing by the end of it. I then became the program director, the very position I was told would never hire me, which meant I was managing everything on air. I was doing all of this while taking part in another battle, this one in my mind. I lived through the 2016 Horse River wildfire, which saw the entire region of Fort McMurray and Wood Buffalo evacuated to run for their lives. I still to this day have a page of photos on my phone from that day, which serve as a reminder to me of what we all went through. I was told by many listeners that I was the last voice they could find as they scanned the dial in their car trying to find information about what was going on. Station's in a high school in downtown Fort McMurray, and from where it was located, I could see fire and smoke from every direction. I came to a point where I thought I was gonna go down with the ship and that I wouldn't be leaving the station. That was a sobering process to go through. Eventually, we heard banging on our door, and one of the firemen from just up the road told us to get our butts out of there. So me and my last colleague left. I had to sign off and say goodbye to the community with no idea whether or not I'd ever get to stand in front of that microphone again. My process of understanding mental illness started here. In the weeks that followed, I was the guy trying to do everything for everyone else to not deal with my own stuff. On Canada Day, 2 months after the wildfire took place, one of my closest friends drove me up to the community that he lived in to show me the pit where his house once stood. The house that he and I were hanging out in a week before the fire, watching movies. Something broke in me that day, and it was the first time I really knew something was wrong. I called a local crisis line and HealthLink to see what they had to say. At this point, I was desperate. I realized I had a really big choice to make. I had to decide whether or not I wanted to live. I remember standing in the back of my church looking around at everyone else attending a service, my peers, all engaged and taking in the experience. I, on the other hand, felt completely dead inside. I felt this disconnect. Why were they engaged in feeling something, and why did I feel absolutely nothing? I had started on notes for close family and friends for after I was gone, but I didn't finish them. I decided there was no longer any time, that my clock had expired. I had a couple friends who could tell I was unwell stop and talk to me as I was leaving, but I put on the mask I needed to get out of there. I got into my car and put on my seatbelt. I'm not sure why. I was gonna go drive off the bridge, but I still managed to put my seatbelt on. Safety first, I guess. My phone was sitting on the passenger seat beside me. I put the brake down with my hand on the gear shift, ready to put it into drive when my phone started ringing. I looked down and saw Mom was calling. I took a moment to think whether or not to answer. I then decided if I was gonna take my life, the least my mom deserved was one final phone call. I answered it, and the first words that came out of her mouth were, "Are you okay?" And I responded with, "What do you mean?" She said again, "Jeremy, are you okay?" I realized I wasn't okay. And in fact, it was the most unwell I had ever been up until this point. I can honestly say the timing and the way it all happened made it feel like God stretched his hand down to pick me up out of this deep, dark pit with no escape. If it wasn't for that phone call, I truly believe I wouldn't be here today. Then everything began to turn around for me. I started going to counseling to learn about and manage my mental illnesses, started talking about how I was doing, and I changed things about my life to better deal with everything. Since then, I can't say it's all been easy. There's been ups and downs, and I'm consistently working through what it means to be healthy. Part of my battle is replaying the same things in my mind over and over and over again, the past, present, and future. My brain is going at all times. It's absolutely debilitating. I can say, because of reaching out and talking to people about what I'm going through, I broke the cycle of stigma and shame that comes with mental illness. I used to believe I was the only one and that no one would understand. As of now, I have discovered that I have generalized anxiety disorder, depression, separation anxiety, seasonal affective disorder, past PTSD, and undiagnosed OCD and ADD. I have a lot of squirrel moments. Also, the reason I am reading something I wrote just instead of winging it is because I often forget details in conversations, so this helps me to stay focused. I tore ligaments in my ankle a couple of years ago, and I had to get a walking cast to let it heal. If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to walk today. The same applies to mental illness. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. Standing up and doing something about a mental issue is the strongest thing you can do. In my personal development journey, I didn't realize how I would impact those around me. I had a conversation with a dear friend of mine last year about some of the trauma I experienced as a young kid and how that made me see and feel about myself. He shared that he experienced the same thing as me and had never told anyone about it other than his wife. The only reason he chose to tell me is because I decided to stand up and stop listening to the lie that told me I'm alone. He and I have grown incredibly close. We chat every Sunday and encourage each other as we work through our past. We both feel like opportunities are beginning through what happened to help us, and they will enable us to help other people out there. That's usually what happens when we go through hardships. We can turn them around and help others. I actually had a realization today before I started to film this video. I forgot a part I needed yesterday to film, and after going to pick it up and returning to my hotel in Fort McMurray, I realized that I forgot another part that was supposed to be included in the case. I decided to do some vision casting instead for the year instead of filming. When I went in today to pick up the cable I was missing, I ended up having an almost hour-long conversation, and I remembered a key detail that I didn't originally include in this. I also had an epiphany. When I started my personal development journey 2 years ago, I was 26. 20 years earlier is when I identified my mental illness first started, separation anxiety. I didn't realize that it was 20 years later that I began working on my personal development journey. I also forgot to include a really important moment. In August of 2019, I had a really bad day and didn't feel like I could go home, so I went driving. I ended up going into Rocky Mountain House, though I didn't know where I was going. I felt led and went to the water treatment plant, where I sat in my car and once again considered going into the water. This time, I reached out. I called a dear friend of mine from here in Fort McMurray and told him about what I was going through. That's where this next key piece of my story comes in. I made a major decision at the start of 2020. And I started an antidepressant for the first time. I've dealt with mental illnesses for over 20 years, so it was about time. With how crazy last year was, I don't know if I could have gotten through it without my journey of personal development and learning some healthy coping strategies. I bought a yoga mat to stretch. I wind down every night with no screens before bed. I read. I use Balance, an app that leads me through guided meditations and mindfulness, which really helped me to shut off my non-stop thoughts, which, by the way, are the main reason I feel anxiety. I drink tea and take hot baths. I started a social media detox in October and rarely go on other than for business purposes, although I do enjoy TikTok. I discovered I'm an Enneagram 2, which helps me to understand things about myself I never thought possible. I also do devotions daily in the morning and make sure to make my bed. It's the little things as well as the big things. I'm in strong friendships with like-minded people from my church that encourage me and strengthen me. When this pandemic is over, I can't wait to get back to the gym to pump everything out, and I also can't wait to hug every person I see. I need sleep. If I don't get good quality sleep, I become unhealthy. I also discovered that when I'm down and dealing with my thoughts, emotions, and problems, if I do something to help someone else, I feel better. When we choose to be kind and go out of our way to help another person in those times, we get a burst of serotonin that helps us to feel better. Boom, science. I found things that genuinely help me in the moments that I feel tensions rise. That's all new as of this last year, and I'm only just beginning. I returned to the water treatment plant 1 year after my last suicidal ideation. I was in a completely different mindset. I no longer felt like I had to take my own life. I now feel purpose and joy. That took me 28 years to get to, but I finally feel like I've reached a place where I'm able to breathe. That doesn't mean my journey's over. In fact, it's just beginning. If you have mental struggles, you are not alone. Welcome to the majority. If you're trying to figure out what you can do to make yourself better, talk to someone. Talking is the only way you'll ever move past where you are right now. I want to share something with you. What others say about you does not define you. You need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and truly love who you see staring back at you. I haven't always, and I can't say I always will. But I do know I'm much stronger now than I was as I learn to be in the moment. Wherever you are, know there are so many people that care about you and want to see you succeed. Your worst days do not define you. The way you respond to your worst days is what defines you. I hope you stand up, rise above stigma, and tell someone about what you're going through. Whatever you're dealing with is merely a blip on the radar of your whole life, but it's an important blip. It will help you to find your strengths amongst your moments of weakness. If you're not growing, you're dying. Never stop growing and never stop becoming the person you're meant to be. The world needs you. There's no other you out there. So please do not deprive us of your unique gifts, talents, and light. Be blessed and encouraged today. No matter your struggles, you can get through this. I honestly feel like I've only touched on the surface of my story and the moments I've identified from the past that have affected me. I feel like this video could have easily been 8 hours if I really went into depth of what I discovered about my life. But what I am really thankful for is that I've started the journey. I am nowhere near where I want to be in my life, but I am so glad that I put in the effort that I have. It's all leading me to where I want to be. If I'm being honest, I still have no clue what my personal development goals are for this year. I'm working on that. I know when 2022 hits, I want to have accomplished more than I did in the last 2 years. My hope is that this year will be the most successful one yet, personally and professionally. I hope to see you along on the journey. You can join me on social media at JDHunter.music. You can also see all the things I'm up to by visiting my Linktree. It's on the screen, linktree.com/JDHuntermusic. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. I know there's a million videos you could have chosen to watch, but I sincerely hope that hearing my story gives you the confidence you need to rise up and work on yourself. Don't let yourself fall into the lie that you can't start today. The thing about New Year's resolutions is they tend to be something that we become relaxed on, and when we don't accomplish them, we abandon them altogether. I heard a stat that 75% of people give up after the first month. Every day can be New Year's if we consistently work on ourselves and continually set goals and crush them. Be encouraged today that no matter what your life has looked like, today is the start of a brand new life if you choose for it to be. Be blessed and encouraged. God bless you and your family. May this year be everything you want it to be and so much more. Much love. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and join me on all my social networks. Bye for now.